The Israeli-Palestinian Conflict by Matthew Drape. Three key causes of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict are the Israeli and Palestinian desire for control of land, the religiously based need for political control over Jerusalem, and the Israeli need for a homeland of their own so that they as a people feel that their people are secure. The Israeli people are a people with a scarred past. During World War II, they were almost wiped out by the Nazis. They have been slowly migrating into the Middle East since the late 1800s and even have their own country now. They are a mostly Jewish people. The Palestinians are an Arab people who have lived in the area that now houses Israel and Palestine for centuries. They are a mostly Muslim people. This conflict takes place in the land shared by Israel and Palestine. It is in the Middle East, right next to the Sinai Peninsula and Jordan. The main Palestinian lands are the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip and the West Bank have been walled in by the Israelis with what the Israelis call a security fence to separate them from Israel. One piece of this conflict is the fight over who controls what land. In modern times, it began in the late 1800s when the Israelis came into Palestinian land and started to claim the land as their own. During World War I, Great Britain promises a Jewish nation in Palestine.
It was in that vast, underdeveloped and underpopulated territory that the British had promised in the language of the 1917 Balfour Declaration to support the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. The declaration also promised that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Open Jewish immigration to the Holy Land was encouraged, as was freedom of speech, religion, and assembly for the Arabs of Palestine, rights they had sorely lacked under Turkish rule.
Israel claimed itself as an independent state in 1948. The conflict escalated during what is now called the Six-Day War in 1967, when the Israelis set out against the Golan Heights, Gaza, the West Bank, including Jerusalem, and the Sinai, and took over all of them. Also in 1980, the UN came up with Resolution 465, which states that Israel's policy and practices of settling parts of its population and new immigrants in those territories constitute a flagrant violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention and also constitute a serious obstruction to achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East. This statement is showing that the Israelis are continuing the conflict by building those Israeli settlements in Palestinian land. Another way that Israel has tried to get control over more land is with the West Bank Wall. The wall was built in the early 2000s and is a barrier between Israel and Palestine. The wall has blocked off Palestinians from their jobs and their homes, and is a very long and tedious process to try to go through the wall to get somewhere on the other side. Another piece in this intricate conflict is the ongoing fight over Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a very important religious city to Jews, Muslims, and Christians. It is the third most important city in the Muslim faith because it is where Muhammad supposedly ascended into heaven, and also has a mosque called the Dome of the Rock on top of the spot where he supposedly ascended. It is religiously important to the Jews because it is where the ruins of the Temple of David are, and the western, formerly Wailing Wall of the temple still stand. It is also important to Christians because it is where Jesus supposedly died and was buried. Both sides of the conflict claim that they should have control over the city, but neither will let the other have control over it. Israel even went as far as to cut it out of the Palestinian landscape by putting a section of their security fence in between it and the Palestinians.
At Camp David in 2000, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak agreed to the border suggested by President Clinton that would have established a West Bank Gaza Palestinian state with some territorial adjustments and with the Palestinians getting East Jerusalem as their capital.
The two sides were not able to agree on a final outcome for the status of Jerusalem during these attempts to decide the fate of Jerusalem in 2000 at Camp David. During the Arab peace proposal in 2002, the Arab countries state that there should be the acceptance of the establishment of a sovereign independent Palestinian state on the Palestinian territories occupied since the 4th of June 1967 in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, with East Jerusalem as its capital. This statement has shown that the Palestinians still see East Jerusalem as theirs and will not give it up like the Israelis want them to. Another very important piece in this conflict is the Israelis' fear that other groups are seeking to destroy Israel. During the 19th century, European Jews concluded that Gentile hostility was so intractable that the Jews would be wiped out or suffer eternally unless they had their own land. Also, They were almost entirely wiped out by the Nazis during World War II, so they're scared that something like that may happen again. They also believe that if they give the Palestinians too much power, the Palestinians will try to do away with the entire nation of Israel, and then the Jews will truly be lost. The following video shows an example of why the Israelis are fearful for the future of their nation.
As Gaza militants continue to fire rockets into southern Israel and the Jewish state responds with targeted airstrikes, anti-Israel protests have erupted in many Muslim countries. Chanting "Free Palestine" and "No Compromise," Tunisians marched in the streets of the capital Tunis to express their solidarity for the people of the Gaza Strip. The country's governing Ennahda party praised the, quote, heroic Palestinian people and condemned the Zionist savage crimes committed in Gaza. Much the same in Yemen and Libya, where protesters criticized Israel's airstrikes on underground Hamas rocket launching sites. In Cairo, hundreds of Egyptians protested against Israeli airstrikes on Gaza as Egypt's President Mohamed Morsi vowed to support the enclave's people in the face of, quote, blatant aggression. U.S. President Barack Obama has called Morsi to urge him to help ease tensions between Israel and the Palestinians as Israel's Operation Pillar of Defense continues, and so do the rockets fired from the Gaza Strip into Israel.
While there are many complex issues in this conflict, almost all of them circulate around the conflict over land. To have a long-standing peace between Israel and Palestine, two things have to be done. One, they both have to give up on the idea that they need to be in control over Jerusalem. This could be done by one giving Jerusalem to the other as a peace offering, or they can agree to give Jerusalem up as an independent international city like the Vatican, so that it was open to everyone and no one would own it. This could solve the conflict because one of the main reasons that the two countries are fighting is over control over Jerusalem, and if either one has full control over it, or neither, they would stop fighting over it. Or two, Israel could withdraw from the West Bank and allow Palestinians to have full control over their own land. This would work because another large portion of the conflict is because the Palestinians are angry with Israel for taking over their land, and if they got their land back, I think they would calm down and could get along.